forget, it was like $26,000 she spent on a psychic to figure out if the house was the right house that she should be buying, to then use all of the money to where we couldn't close anymore.
Before we get started with our episode, we're going to hear from our sponsors. Bombas just dropped a new line of super comfortable tees, socks, and undergarments that'll help you get that drawer a little bit more organized while also doing some good. So get comfy this spring and give back with Bombas. Head over to bombas.com/Rebecca and use code Rebecca for 20% off on your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Rebecca and use code Rebecca at checkout. Now let's get started with this week's episode. Hey everybody!
Hey, nice to see you here.
I'm so excited.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you guys so much for joining Jordan on her new podcast. So everyone, this is Jordan Nutter, my new friend. I'm so excited for y'all to meet her. So she is a mortgage lender.
Yep.
And I want to hear all about how, I'm going to shut up soon. Everyone always gets very excited for me to stop talking because I ramble. I want to hear about how you came into that profession, decided that's what you want to do with your career, and then started social media. Go ahead and take it away.
So I started in mortgages back in October of 2019, so almost 5 years ago. And it was weird. And if you ever talk to mortgage people, they're always like, I'm not quite sure. It was like a friend of a friend, and that's essentially what happened, who was in the business. And I knew I wanted to help people, and I was in this like weird transitional phase of my life where I was like not quite sure what I wanted to do. And so I was like, well, let's just try something that I've never done before, and hopefully they take a chance on me. And thankfully the company did. And that was, October of 2019. I moved from California out to Atlanta, just north of Atlanta, for that job. And I've changed companies a couple times at this point, but at the time I was working with a lot of first-time home buyers because this girl who knew nothing about mortgages, who moved from California to Atlanta. So, in the South, they're very particular. They want to work, which is understandable. I had a California number. I had to change it. I had to get a local number because nobody would answer the phone. And so I realized there was a ton of people out there that just didn't know how to purchase a home and didn't understand what is your credit? How many credit scores do you have? What goes into purchasing, and what's the behind the scenes and all of that. So I started making content on social media to try to educate more people. And since then I have I've gone, I don't have by any means anywhere near as many.
Great.
But it's been
wonderful.
Fun. It's been great.
Yes.
And so now I do, well, not now. I did start with educational, and I still do educational content, but I also on a whim did a skit, and that really took off.
Which one was it?
So it was a couple came to me. They made $20 collectively an hour, and they wanted to buy $1 million home. And then I was wrong because they didn't qualify. I wasn't right.
Oh, what? Yeah.
I wasn't
you
right.
didn't want them to have nice things.
No, not I just didn't know what I was doing. Even though it was my job.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what I was doing. I explained to them many times, the amount of money you make doesn't even qualify or doesn't even cover the property taxes and homeowners insurance and mortgage insurance. So I don't know how we're going to pay for the house. This is just the taxes and insurance you can't cover. How are we expected to pay for the house? But I was wrong.
Yes.
Apparently.
As usual.
So
right.
They went to their person that was going to make it work.
Bless. And I know that we kind of have some people who are younger viewers, define mortgage.
Yeah. So mortgage would be the money that you take from an institution to take from an institution, and in exchange they are going to give you a house for that. Just like when you go and you get a car or anything along those lines. So it's just a much bigger loan that you're taking out, and generally it's over a much longer period of time, 30 years compared to a car that's 5,
that's
7,
crazy.
something like that.
That's wild. So what exactly is the process to getting a loan for a house? Like, what does that actually look like? Because I know, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm rambling.
No, you're good.
I'm rambling. Because I know that, like, in today's world, it's so hard for people, especially people in our generation, to, like, really get to the point where they can buy a house. And so many people don't even know where to start with the process. So what does that look like?
So it's interesting because, you know, our parents or grandparents are like known for saying, well, I had to put 20% down and the interest rates were higher. And I'm like, yeah, we can argue that, but also like the cost of living was very different.
So much different.
Very, very different.
Yes.
So even to this day, though, I have people that think you have to put 20% down. And I'm like, no, like I could get you maybe, depending on where you live and like scores and all of that, like maybe 0% down. I don't know. But essentially what you want to do, and most people, when they come to me, they do call me like 1 or 2 years before they feel like they're going to be ready to purchase because they want to get everything in line. Most people that don't watch me just assume like I have to pay all my debt off and I have to be at the same job for 2 years and it's cut and dry and that's how it should be. And unfortunately, that's not, depending on how, unfortunately, that's not the case. So I always tell people like call, I mean, we're licensed everywhere except for New York. I'm like, and even in New York, I'm like, I can't tell numbers to you, but I could tell you the basics of like credit and finance and things like that. So just talk to a mortgage lender and get an idea of like, where should my credit be? Or like, this is what I'm doing right now. Is this the right path I should be going down? But essentially, we go back in most cases, unless you're self-employed, we go back about 60 days on your bank statements and most of the time like 30 days on your pay stubs. But just keeping everything like really clean. Like let's not, if you're not self-employed, there should be all of this, or like a cash tip. Like employee, you shouldn't be putting like all of this random money into your account. That's probably going to cause a red flag. Or, you know, if you keep having insufficient funds on your bank statement, they're going to be like, why should we lend you money for a $300,000 home when you can't have enough money to pay for the expenses you have right now? So no late payments, like just these little things that feel, now that I've been in this field for so long, very common sense, but unfortunately they're not, because they just don't teach this in school, at least not fully right now. So speaking to a mortgage advisor for sure
is the first step.
Yes.
Okay.
Even like before you even think about like maybe a year from now I might be ready to buy a home, or I want to, or like I just signed a lease, like talk to somebody right then and there, because the last thing you want to do is talk to like an agent and go and look at homes and then they're like, okay, well great, but can you actually afford this home? And then you fall in love with it and you realize actually I can't. So
Dang. Okay, so after you talk to a mortgage advisor, what do you think the next step should be?
if you are in the space of like, this is going to happen in the next couple of months, let's say, then asking them, do you have any recommendations for an agent, or asking family, friends, whatnot for a realtor recommendation, and then having the two get together. Like, I don't care if they don't live in the same place and they're like on a phone call or a Zoom, but that is your team. Like, they are fully supporting you in what in most people's lives is the biggest purchase they'll ever take on.
Yeah.
So make sure that you are like, they're not enemies. They're on the same page.
Right.
They're on the same team.
They
to help
want you to get the house.
They want you to succeed. So like, it's not this secret. Like, I'm not going to tell my agent who my lender is, or my lender. Like, I never understood that. So like, we're here to help you together.
So there are people who like genuinely think like you're out to get them?
They're just like, oh, I'll relay the message to them. And I'm like, but you understand, when we go under contract, like, I'm going to know who they are. So I have to talk to them at some point.
Interesting. Are they like,
I've never fully asked them,
reason?
like, because I feel weird asking that question. Like, do you think I'm trying to get, like, what is the reason behind it? Maybe I should put this as like an anonymous thing. Like, will people answer?
Interesting. Have you like had clients like straight up think that you were like working against them?
I've not had clients specifically say that, but I've had clients that are like, well, I just don't understand why you would do that. And I'm like, well, that's why I was trying to get you on the phone to like walk you through. This is why I set the file up this way because X, Y, and Z based on what you told me. So I've had some people that are just a little like, it feels like they think.
They don't necessarily understand the process, so
Right.
they like overthink it. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's so scary. So like, okay, so you talk to a mortgage agent, you talk to
A realtor.
a realtor. Yep. Yes, I blanked. ADHD, man.
Good.
Sometimes it just, whew. Okay, next step.
So after that, you will then have your agent start showing you homes.
Okay.
So
That's the fun part.
that is the fun part. And it's interesting because depending on the criteria for the particular home, I mean, it could take 24 hours to find a home.
Right.
It could take months to find a home. And so I really always tell people, especially my first time home buyers, and I know it's really hard because social media, it's like, oh, well, they have the big house and they just built their home and they just have the beautiful neighborhood. And I know it's really a lot to take on sometimes, but at the end of the day, they're not paying your bills and they're not living the lifestyle that you're living. Like they don't have to go to the job that you go to. So you have to keep these things in mind when you're trying to buy a home, because especially the younger clients I work with, and if they find me on social media, they're like, well, we don't really have any wiggle room. And I'm like, okay, explain to me, why don't we have wiggle room? Well, we really need a pool and we really need 4 bedrooms. And I'm like, okay, let me think about this. You are a single couple with 1 dog. Why do we need 4 bedrooms? Why do we need a pool? Like, why do we need these? These are not needs. These are wants. We need
Right.
a roof over our head. We need somewhere safe. We need at least 3 bedroom or at least 2 bedrooms because we have a guest room. Fine. Like, we don't need 4 bedrooms and a pool.
Right.
So let's not just like think about this as those are needs. They're truly our wants. And if there's any sort of room to adjust our search so that we can get into a home, if that's something you want, then we need to just adjust our expectations a little bit. But yeah, then you go look for homes and hopefully find the one that fits your expectations. And if not, then you're open to having an honest conversation with your team of like, this may not be doable at this point in time because of whatever, the market or what you're wanting doesn't fit, so on and so forth. So
Interesting.
yeah, then you go find a home.
Interesting. Okay, so you go, and that's when you find a lender.
The lender's first, and then your agent,
Okay.
and then you go find homes.
Okay.
And then once you find one, then essentially you come back to the agent.
Okay. So when you talk to a lender about like advice, that's when
Yeah.
you're like, this is my lender. Okay. Cool.
No, I mean, maybe not. Like, I've had people that have talked to me years ago, and then they come back and they're like, we really like the conversation. You gave us a lot of information. We want to come back. And then there's other people that just are like, I never hear from them again. So I just assume they go somewhere else. And it happens, like new construction, there's the preferred lenders, and it's like, I can't most of the time beat out these like crazy incentives they give. So sometimes I don't get to work with the clients, but if you had a great initial phone call, then it's worth like exploring that when you're ready to actually purchase. And if it still feels good and like they're giving you what it is that you need, then
Okay.
it's worth.
So when looking around for a lender, like what are some green flags people should be on the lookout for with
Yep.
lenders, and what are some red flags that people should be on the lookout for?
Green flags, definitely how they make you feel.
Okay.
Like, that is super important, because if you're a first-time home buyer and they are not willing to explain things to you, answer your questions, and you're just like, all right, I guess we're just gonna go with it, then you're gonna feel so lost along the way. So having somebody who's willing, and even if they're busy, but they're like, hey, let's schedule a time then. Like, let's make sure we get this on the books and have this conversation. So that's really important. 2 would be making sure that they have the means to close the loan. So like they have the support staff, like ask them like what is it that how many processor, or I mean, these are terms that most people
Right.
don't understand, but like, hey Jordan, can you walk me through like what should I expect from you and your team, or what does your team look like? And then that person explaining to you, like, we have X amount of these people and X amount of these people, and so on and so forth. Red flags, if they're not willing to send you any sort of like fee sheets, and they're just like, oh, this is how much. Now it's different if you're like a veteran buyer and you have a basic understanding of what closing costs are,
right,
and what goes into it, then that may not be an issue for you. But when you're a first-time home buyer, you should very much be understanding all of the fees that go into purchasing a home. So making sure that you have a lender, and if they're like, oh, we'll just get to that later, that's never good. You never want that.
Okay, are there any other red flags that you would be on the lookout for?
I would say outside of that, if it's a company that you like can't find anything, I mean, the internet is so like useful, it's insane. So like if your mom's cousin's daughter was like, oh, I use this guy, and then you look him up and you can't find anything. I'm not saying that person's not great, but like, can we look up the company? Is it like, are there other people that have worked with this person? So just making sure that you can find said company.
That makes sense.
Is important as well.
Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense. We're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. So, how's your sock drawer looking lately? Is it scary? Well, have no fear. Bombas just dropped a new line of super comfortable tees, socks, and undergarments that'll help you get that drawer a little bit more organized while also doing some good. In case you weren't aware, Bombas has a one purchase, one donated mission. What that means is that every time you buy an item from them, whether it's a shirt, a sock, undergarments, you name it, Bombas will donate essential clothing items to people facing homelessness. To date, Bombas has already donated over 100 million clothing items and counting. What I personally love about Bombas is all the buttery soft fabric in the clothes. It's just so comfortable. Perfect for my lazy days. So get comfy this spring and give back with Bombas. Head over to bombas.com/Rebecca and use code Rebecca for 20% off on your first purchase. That's bombas.com/Rebecca and use code Rebecca at checkout. Now back to the episode. So we both of our houses, we were really fortunate when it came to home buying. We bought our first house shortly after Avery's mom passed, and I don't want to say we had the fortunate reality of having life insurance. Like that doesn't, like it's not a privilege, but like is at the same time.
I hear
like
ya.
Really weird.
It's this weird, like, I don't know how to.
Right. Because whenever people are like, oh, you were able to buy a home, that's so lucky. And I'm like, well, I mean, I would rather have my mother-in-law. But,
right.
So like we had that situation and we were able to buy our home, our first home with that. And we got it new construction. It was actually during COVID. We were really lucky because this neighborhood was going up, and just about so for those who don't know, with new construction, they will sell like these bunch of houses, and once they're all sold, they'll up the price. And they'll sell these bunch of houses, and once they're sold, they'll up the price. Which sucks a lot.
Phases. They're phases. They're called phases. Yep.
And so they were in like their last phase.
Oh no.
But someone who had bought one of the earlier phases had relatives in another state get sick from COVID. It was like right at the beginning of COVID.
Oh no.
And so they had to move. So they resold the house for like the price that they were selling it for, because they knew that with the phases going on, that if they sold it for more, someone would just buy one of the new houses.
Right.
And they didn't even finish building it yet. So we bought it maybe 2 or 3 weeks before they finished building at a lower phase price. It was an end unit.
Oh,
We really lucked out with it. We were really happy with it. And then once social media really started hitting, I got on all the short form programs and platforms when all these social media platforms were doing like bonus initiatives and things like that.
Yes,
That was just straight, like so privileged, like a lot of privilege, a lot of fortunate things happening at the same time. And that's how we got this house. And it was also early phase in how long? It was about a year ago, but early phase in new construction, and yeah, we just really lucked out in finding it in like one of the early phases, and we were
Okay.
like one of the first phases to move in. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
I love that. Did you go with the preferred lender for book? Did they give like crazy incentives?
Did we? Yeah, Avery was happy.
Yeah.
We did. I know for at least this house, we ended up buying down points. And I know like Avery did so much research into that, but I don't actually understand what that means. Like, what are points when you buy them? Like, what is that?
Yeah. So it's a cost that you incur at closing. So it's a
Okay.
one-time cost.
Okay.
And there's permanent buy downs, and then there's temporary buy downs,
Buy downs, like,
which is for points.
okay.
So this is where it can get like really confusing because I have to like get out of my mortgage terminology and be like, we have to speak to like non-mortgage people. And
because I don't know anything.
so 1 point equates to 1% of the loan. So for example, you bought a $400,000 home. If you wanted to buy a point, it would cost $4,000 for said point.
Okay.
Now, what most people assume is that when you buy a point, it automatically lowers your mortgage interest rate by 1%.
Okay.
Which is
the
not
points
true.
Don't do that. Okay.
It lowers it, but it's not like an equal. If I buy 1 point, it equals 1% lower.
Got it.
Which most people, when you initially have that conversation, think that.
Okay.
So
okay.
1 point generally, and it depends on the market and like there's a number of factors that go into it, but normally it moves it by like 1/8 to 1/4%. So sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't make sense to
Okay.
do it. Now, how we figure out what your points are. Now, back in COVID days, people didn't pay for points because the market was so good. Obviously,
Right.
the Fed, everything was so great that people actually, it was so good that I had people that would take a higher rate and they would get a refund. So
Wow.
there's the par, which is you pay nothing. Then there's points where you pay something for your rate, which is where pretty much everybody is right now. And then there's above par, which means you get a credit. So that's when we got to like roll closing costs in. When people are like, oh, I want to just roll my closing costs into the loan. That's how we did it. Now, you can't do that now. Not
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
But that's what we used to do.
That's crazy.
We could roll closing costs into the loan because people are like, oh, 2%, I'll take a 2.5 and I'll just not pay any closing costs. And I'm like, sure, great. What's a 2.5 over a 2 at that point, right? Like
That's crazy.
so that's how people used to like roll in their closing cost, is that's what they would do, just take a higher rate. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, that's not
Now
really-
it's
that's not an
crazy.
option. Almost everybody has to pay points or they have like a very high rate. And so the main thing that is going to define what and if you have points is the market itself, obviously. So that's going to be primary. What are we looking at? After that, it would be your credit score, your debt to income ratios, how much are you putting down? So these are all factors that play into that, as well as like if you buy a primary home as opposed to an investment property, your rate on the primary home will be better because it's less of a risk.
Right.
Because people they'll default on their investment property before the roof that they live under.
Right.
So those are some things that like play a part into points. So yeah, you pay it at closing. It's a one-time fee, and it's to buy down your rate in most cases to a permanent, like fixed space, like whatever
Okay.
the rate is. And then it doesn't change unless you refinance down the road, or obviously if you sell the home. And then there's the option for a temporary buy down. And that's like you have like the builder or the seller would pay for it. And it's weird. What happens is, like, let's say your rate today was, I don't know, 7%. And your builder was like, oh, we'll do a 1-year buy down for you. So your rate would be 6% for the first year. And then years 2 through 30 would be at the 7%. So you get like this, like you get like an introductory, like reduced interest rate, and they pay for it.
Right.
But that's a temporary buy down, which we just rolled out. Like we would have rolled this out. Everyone started doing this, I think, last year, beginning of last year was kind of when everyone was doing it. So, and it's still a thing. But yeah, that's the difference between like a permanent or a temporary.
Okay, interesting. And so when would you talk about like point and those kinds of things? Like after you decide this is the home that I want, or during your initial meeting with your lender?
So I always will put some, unless like there's just none at all and the borrower has like crazy high credit and stuff, but most of my buyers have some sort of points associated with their rate. So I'll always put it on their initial fee sheet that I give them and say, hey, if you wanted to buy points, this is what they're going to look like, and here's where they're listed, and this is an example, but keep in mind this is today's rate and today's market. We may not go under contract for another month, so I can't promise you this is going to be exactly in line with what you end up getting.
Right.
So I do always talk to them about it then and say, hey, we have the option to pay less in points. We would have to take a higher rate. You could pay more in points if you really wanted to and take a lower rate. But then I kind of give them the pros and cons once we actually go under contract and see what the market's truly doing at that point to see if it makes sense in their situation to buy it down or not.
Okay, cool, interesting. So then once what would the next step in buying the home be?
So once you go under contract and the agent would send everything to the lender.
And that's after you put like the deposit and stuff down.
Yeah, so you'll go under contract and then you have your earnest money. Mm-hmm. So your earnest money is like that. I always tell people it's like a good faith estimate, like or a good faith deposit, I should say. Normally it's like 1% of your purchase price. So you put that down. Within the first like 5 days max, in most cases, your agent would tell you. A lot of times your agent will request that you get an inspection. It's not required like from us as the lender, but it's not, it's not going to hurt to get it.
Right.
So you would get your earnest money, you would pay for your inspection. If you do get an inspection, it comes back clear, then your agent says, hey, lender, you're good to go. You can order the appraisal. And you would pay for that. And as long as the appraisal comes in and you're like uploading your documents and everything's running smoothly, then generally 30 days later is when you would close on your home.
Crazy. And do the lenders show up to closing and stuff, right?
Normally not. The agent, I would say like 99% of the time shows up to the closing. Lenders, like when I was stationary, I would show up to almost all of my Georgia closings.
Okay.
But because our job is different, I can carry my license in all of the country, whereas agents generally, because they have to be in person, they generally don't. They carry their license outside of maybe one or two states max.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll see like additional ones if they have a really big team. But yeah, lenders generally don't show up. I try to though when I'm stationary.
Interesting. Okay. Have you how often do you get to closing and like it just doesn't go through? Like something happens or something comes up, or you go under contract and then something happens and you just cannot close on the house.
Oh, there's been many a times where I've had people under contract and we've found out within like the first week and a half that it's not working because like something's wrong with the inspection. And it's like so bad that they aren't willing to like take that on, or the seller's not willing to like fix it.
So it's like usually a seller's issue. Usually
if it's that early in the process, it's normally something wrong with the home. Like within the first week of going under contract, if we have to back out of it, it has to do something with the home.
Okay.
Normally, if we're getting out of a transaction within like, if we've passed the first week and we're between like weeks 2 and 3, it's probably going to have to do with the buyer, and they either didn't disclose something, whether they forgot or they thought we weren't going to catch it, or maybe there's an issue with their pay or their assets, like something normally is sitting on the buyer if it goes wrong in that time frame. And then if it's within like the last week to week and a half, normally it's like something came back wrong on the appraisal, title found something that they can't like figure out to where they can pass the house from the current sellers to you. It could be like, it's rare that I have somebody now that like spends all of the money or like quits their job.
Has that happened?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, 100%.
They spend all their money?
Yeah.
What do they think is going to happen when they buy okay, you have to tell me about this.
So the worst one, and it was actually a colleague of mine. She spent, it was like $26,000 she spent on a psychic to figure out if the house was the right house that she should be buying, to then use all of the money to where we couldn't close anymore.
What'd the psychic say?
Apparently not anything enough to where she felt the need to fully like let her go.
Oh my gosh. $26,000 on a psychic?
Mm-hmm. And then she didn't have any money to close. And she lost the house. And I'm like, well, that's why she kept you on the house or on the phone so long, because I mean, she wanted all of this money, and it was insane.
This was a colleague of yours?
Mm-hmm. Happened.
So she's like a lender. She should know better.
No, like this was her client.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm
This was
sorry.
her- sorry. This is her client.
What?
Yeah. I had another one who this one was mine. He quit. So we do a final verbal verification of employment.
Right.
So like the day of, we will call
Their boss.
and be like, hey, is John Smith still working there? And they're like, yes or no. Like, we've already verified the pay and the hours and all of that, but like generally the morning of, they'll get a phone call and it's like, did so-and-so still work there? And we called one day and they were like, no, he actually quit this morning. And I'm like, it's literally 10 o'clock in the morning and we are about to close and you're going to tell me you quit this morning? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, what time did you call to quit?
What did he say?
He was like, they just made me so upset and I just couldn't hold on. And I'm like,
For like 2 hours?
Right, 2 hours?
Like, just 2 hours. That's all you needed to do was hold on 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We had our own little debacle at closing where we almost couldn't close.
Really?
For this house. I was so upset.
Oh no.
So, and like looking back, maybe we should have known, but it just wasn't communicated to us.
Okay. What was it?
So I might have been the jerk. It's very possible. So I actually couldn't be on our loan.
Okay.
Because I had only been self-employed
Yep.
for like a year.
Right.
And you need 2 years of tax returns
Correct.
to go on the loan. But for this house, Avery didn't make enough to go on the loan himself. And so we ended up putting his father on the loan just in name. Like, he doesn't
Right.
actually do anything. I pay it off. But like, just, to be able to get the house.
Right.
And we passed all the checks, got all the documents, sent all the forms. But like, no one clarified that he had to actually be there on closing day.
Got it. Okay.
Like, it was just never mentioned.
Right.
Like, we didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Because like, his name's not on the deed or anything. And he lives 2 hours away. So, we get to closing at like 2 p.m. on a Friday.
No.
And they're like, oh, where's your father-in-law? And I just stared at them and I said, what? What do you mean? And like, luckily Avery's dad is retired.
Okay.
So we just called him. We're like, hey, what you doing? You want to hop in the car to come to Raleigh really quick? And he goes, all right. And he just hopped in the car and he just drove up.
Stop.
And we just sat there in the office and just waited for 2 hours until he drove up.
Did Avery sign all the paperwork?
Yeah, we were
just hanging out.
Yeah, we
Now
were
you're
just
just
hanging out until we got his signature.
Nice.
And it was so, like, bless their hearts. 'Cause it was a new construction office and they wanted to go home so bad. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I said, like, I'm pretty sure we asked, but I think that we asked a bunch of questions at once. And that one just kind of got missed.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because we're like, yeah, he lives 2 hours away. So, like, electronic signatures are good. Yeah. And I think we also asked about something else where an electronic signature was good, but it was not good for the day of closing.
This is true. Like, you can do, we have what's called like hybrid close, and I don't know if every company has
No,
this,
it's okay.
but like for hybrids, we will trigger the morning of, you'll get like a text and email that says you can sign your documents electronically, but it has to be on the same day as your closing because the signature dates have to match.
Yeah.
So you get to sign like with us a majority of them at on your phone or wherever.
Right.
You have to sign them though before you get to the closing table because the system then has to trigger it to go back to the attorney or title, whatever kind of state you're in, because some states are attorney states and some are title. But then you go and sign in front of the notary the wet signature documents, which that's not a workaround.
Yeah.
There was for like a brief second during COVID.
Right.
But then that like was quickly squashed because they were like literally like put your stuff, like people came, they would like put their documents on the top of the car and like close their windows, and then the attorney would come out and like verify, like the person would take their mask down and verify the driver's license like in the car, and then they would like give the paperwork back and they would sign it and then put it back and they'd like stamp it on the car, like the hood of the car. I'm like, this is insane.
You know what else? I just had like a core memory unlocked.
Okay.
You know what else happened on closing? My father-in-law just drove 2 hours to get there, right?
Okay.
Get there in time. Mm-hmm. And they gave him forms to sign about like his assets and making sure that everything was in check.
Okay.
All of these forms claimed to also need Avery's mother's signature, who passed like a year or two before.
Because her name was still on there.
I don't know.
Was it this one or was it the previous
No,
one?
it was this house.
It was this one.
This house. She had just passed a few years ago, and all the forms like needed her signature. And
Because she
we're
was
like,
still on like the assets.
I don't know.
Something. She would have been on something and like she just never got taken off.
Well, they just tried arguing about it, and we're like, this is not possible.
Like this isn't like a discussion or like an argument.
And
This is not a
we've
subject.
Said that before.
Right.
We've said that she's no longer living, and they're like, but we need her signature. And I'm like, well, I can't really get it.
Right. Yeah. We
Like,
had
it
that.
doesn't-
We had that for a client. She was like, Jordan, her grandpa was co-signing with her, but her grandma had passed.
Oh.
And then there was some documents that were sent over because I think he was giving he was pulling from his assets, and then we saw the statement, and we were like, oh, we need her, and she's like, she passed. So then we had to, the title company was weird, like we had to get a death certificate. I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, why do we need all of this?
That's a lot.
Like the title company's like, well, we need to prove because she's on this document and this one, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's like, it's like,
Why are we doing this?
Logically, it makes sense, but like
Right.
emotionally, it's like, come on, guys. Like,
Right. Yeah.
what? But that's crazy. Well, someone else, like, I had a few stories sent to me of like other scenarios where like the mortgage lender just worked on these contracts for a month, you know, and they're ready to close, and they get to the day of closing, and it just doesn't happen for just some of the craziest reasons. Like, someone sent me a story about how they were working on this contract. It took 2 months to get this contract situated. And they're finally ready to go. It was blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. And the day before closing, they call and say, hey, I actually think I'm going to pass on this house. And they said, what do you mean? You have a deposit down. We have everything in order. Like, we close tomorrow. Yeah, but I'm just not really feeling it anymore. Like, that just feels like a lot of money to be responsible for forever. Like, this is like a however many $100,000 house. And I actually found another house that I can just rent for $2,100 a month. And that feels a lot more manageable. And the lender just paused on the phone and said, your mortgage for this house that we're closing on would be $1,700. That's like $400 less Yeah, but I wouldn't be responsible for the whole sum of the house. And they're like, no, what are you not understanding about? You're going to be paying more money in rent towards another house that you don't get to own instead of paying less money for the, like, you already paid the deposit.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't understand, because the whole house is like a few $100,000 and I don't want to pay all that. And just couldn't get it in his brain that no, he was wrong. He would be paying less money just buying the house.
Yep.
And so the lender, after like 15 minutes of back and forth, was like, you know what? Have fun. Good luck. Just, I can't, I don't, like, you're not going to get it. Okay, that's fine. And like, I can't make you understand.
Right.
But, okay. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah. I had one, it's like very similar to that.
Yeah?
Where he was like, Jordan, I don't know if I can buy this home. And I'm like, okay, well, explain to me, like, what's the issues? And he's like, it's just a big commitment. And I said, I can understand that. And what are we like fearing here? He's like, well, just the payment. And I'm like, that's it. We just have the concern of the payment. Like, we're not concerned about the upkeep. We're not concerned about, like, it's just the payment. I just want to make sure. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, but you understand that the payment is less than what you're paying right now in rent. You received a notice that your rent is going to go up. And I understand, like, taxes and insurance can go up on a home, but, like, you understand that your rent is already going up, and that where it stands before the increase is already higher than your potential mortgage. And it was like we couldn't see eye to eye. I couldn't explain it.
I think, like, I feel like the idea of buying a home just feels so big.
Yeah.
To some people that it's hard to really grasp. Like, it's just hard to grasp. And when, like, you're saying, oh, no, rent is more expensive. Like, even here, like, rent is crazy in this area. Oh, my gosh. I have friends who are paying $2,400 in rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. Crazy. It is ridiculous. Wow. Like you said earlier, our parents kind of ingrained in us, like, 20%, 20%, 20%. What do you recommend for down payments?
So I recommend, if it depends on your budget. So if you're asking me from, like, somebody who has no money and they're trying to save up, then I recommend trying to have 3% for the down payment, and then having like another 3 to 5% for closing costs.
Okay.
Because there's a number of reasons why your closing costs, I know you guys first a couple times you understand. HOAs, no HOAs, taxes, insurance. But I would say all in all, try to shoot for about 8% of the purchase price is what I would say, to cover everything. Now, it's an added bonus if we're in like the market where we currently are, where I'm seeing a lot of contracts come through, even though we're technically in spring, that have some sort of seller concessions to help offset the closing costs. And this may change. I mean, generally in the summer, we don't see it as much because there's more buyers out. It's more of like a winter thing. But I would say account for that much and have an experienced loan officer that understands what your needs are. If your needs are more like, I have more wiggle room with my monthly budget, but I'm a little bit stricter on my out-of-pocket, how can you figure that out for me? Because USDA is 0% down. Conventional first-time home buyers, 3% down. FHA is 3.5% down. Even if you're conventional and you've already purchased, it's 5% down. So there's a lot of options when you're going into a primary purchase, and VA is 0% down. But you have a lot of options, whether it's down payment assistance, there's grants that states have that are available to you, whether you're a first-time home buyer or not. So I think making sure that you can try to shoot for like that 8% number so that you at least can fall back on something. And then if you get, seller help or you get down payment assistance, then, hey, now that's our moving expenses or like our cushion, our little nest egg to kind of have.
And a question that I got a lot is there's a lot of programs that like help people who need to put lower percent downs on houses. However, there are some people who are really concerned that some of those programs in the long run would cost them more money in general than if they waited and just saved up for a higher percent to put down on a down payment.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
When it comes to building equity, we have seen, especially since COVID, I mean, you guys have gone through 2 houses, or you're on your second house now since COVID, the increase in home values.
Yeah.
And so and when I say this, and people know who watch me, like, I never push, like, you have to buy a home. I think it's the best decision that you will ever make in your life. Like, for some people, it's not.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yes.
But if that is something you want to explore, then you have to understand that the value of homes will continue to go up. There's no indication that we are going to have a crash. 2008 happened because there was so much inventory and there was not enough buyers. Now even though the rates are high compared to what we were used to a few years ago, there's not enough inventory still. And when the rates do eventually come down, that will dwindle even further. So there's no indication, nor do I ever think, at least any time in the near future, there will be a crash. So therefore, the values will continue to increase. And if you were to hypothetically, let's say, buy a home today at, I don't know, $400,000, and you put 3% down and you start building that equity, and then, I don't know, you decide the opposite is, let's go ahead and wait, and we'll wait maybe 3 years or so until we save up enough money, and now the value's increased, let's just even say, I don't know, 5%. So we're at $420,000 now that it's increased. So over those 3 years, not only did you pay rent to somebody that you did not accrue equity, no equity was accrued, it's just you were paying somebody else's mortgage.
Right.
And lost all of that money. You also lost in this scenario, the extra $20,000 of equity. So there is the case of, hey, yes, I'm not going to put as much money down, so that would potentially cost me more in the long run. Most people don't live in their home forever. And if they do carry that home, they turn it into a rental. So now somebody else is taking that on. And they're also considering, hey, if the rates do come down, I don't have to sit in that like rat race like everybody had to do it felt like not so long ago. And I have that equity. Now I have even more equity because people are bidding, and I don't have to worry about that. But now I get to take advantage of the lower interest rate to help offset maybe that lower down payment or that higher interest rate I had to take a year or two ago. So for me, I look at it as, if that's an avenue you want to go down, it's never a wrong time to buy if you financially are able to take on that expense. And you have somebody helping you understand what that means and where the numbers sit and kind of what your goals are with that home, then I don't ever find it like I'm currently in the market. So, and that's me as a loan officer that sees what's going on day in and day out. So even for me, and I'm used to the low rates when I first bought, I'm still in the market to purchase a home because I know how much, wealth can come out of real estate and when you continue to build and grow.
Okay. You can always also refinance your loan. What is that exactly?
So, yes, and no. So people are always like, oh, you can always refinance. And like, I would say majority of people can always refinance. But then there are those one-offs that can't because they messed up their credit. Now they can't refinance.
Well, what is refinancing?
So refinancing would be if you so you said that you bought your home a year ago.
Yes.
And let's say next year the rates, because I don't see them like coming down enough for it to make sense for you guys, but let's say the rates come down next year and you're like, okay, we want to refinance. What happens is the lender that you go to get the refinance will essentially pay off your current loan that you have which at that point, let's say you took a 30-year loan out, you'd have 28 years left. So they're going to give you a new loan, and maybe it's a new 30-year loan, and they're going to pay off the loan that you already have. And most people do this for one of two reasons. Either the rates are low enough to where their payment's going to drop down and it makes sense for them to save enough money. And in the same bucket, like maybe they have enough equity to where their mortgage insurance will fall off or will be close to falling off. Or the second one is to take cash out. And normally people, like what I'm seeing with right now, is people are taking cash out even though rates are high because they've accrued so much credit card debt for a number of reasons, and those interest rates are in like the 20 and 30%, and they have so much of it that they have to refinance. So essentially you're taking out a new loan to pay off your current mortgage.
Okay.
And it starts over in most cases unless you get a shorter term. So it's a new mortgage on the home.
Okay, interesting. So then what do you think is typically like the biggest mistake that first time home buyers make?
Most first-time homebuyers' biggest mistake would probably be that it's a mix for me, one of two things. Either they pay off a bunch of debt before they come and talk to me, or they look at their credit report in the wrong place.
Okay.
So the first reason is, or the first main issue, you don't know what you have to, or if you even have to pay anything off until you speak to a lender. So don't just go out and start paying everything off because you think you do, especially installment debt. So student loans, credit cards, not credit cards. Don't pay off installment debts like cars, student loans, anything that has an end date, because when you pay it off, it closes that line of credit out and you no longer have that good history.
Right.
So that happens a lot. And then the other thing is people will look at their credit scores most of the time in one of two places, either Credit Karma, which is a Vantage score, or your credit card or bank, which is your FICO 8. And we as mortgage lenders don't use either one of those.
Okay.
So most of the time those tend to be higher than what your actual mortgage scores are. So I always tell people myfico.com is the best place. They have a free one. You don't even have to pay for it. But that's where you can like see your auto and your mortgage, and you could see all of these different credit scores.
Interesting. So what really goes into your credit score?
So payment history, utilization, new inquiries, the length of the credit as well. So those are just like some of the main ones. So for instance, if you forgot your credit card charges you an annual fee and you forget to pay it and then you have a late payment, it's going to tank your credit. Like you want to avoid late payments at all costs.
Okay.
Utilization. The rule of thumb is if you can keep your credit card utilization to 30% or lower, then that's going to be key.
What does that mean?
So let's say you have a credit card that's $1,000 is the limit. 30% would be $300.
Okay.
So I'm not saying like every day of the month it has to be $300. You can never spend more on it. But what it means is when it reports, and this is like my biggest thing when I teach people and they're like, wait, what did you just say? And I'm like, yay. That's like I love when I learned this. I was like, light bulb. So the only one I'm familiar with is Apple, where the due date and the statement date are the same day.
Okay.
Outside of that, I've never seen another credit card that's like that. So for instance, like my credit card is due on the 2nd of every month. But the statement date comes out on the 7th.
Okay.
There's 5 days in between. Most people, when they come to me, they go, Jordan, I pay my credit card off every month. I'm like, cool. When do you pay it off? And they're like, well, throughout the month. And I'm like, do you pay it off on the due date? They're like, yeah. I'm like, do you spend after that? Yeah. Then you're not cheating the system. And it shouldn't be this hard, and I know it shouldn't be, but unfortunately we have to play the game that we're in, which is hard. So I pay my credit card either down or off on the 2nd. And then I leave that credit card alone personally, as long as you keep it under 30%. I leave it to make sure it's no higher than 30% by the time it reports, which is the 7th for me. Now, I'm paperless, so it's easy because I literally type in Discover, And then I see all of the emails every month on the 7th that's your statement's now available from Discover. So if you're paperless, it's easy.
Right.
But yeah, and then if you don't do it that way, and let's say you pay it off on the 2nd, you spend the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, by the time your statement comes out on the 7th, it's going to have this huge balance.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure that if you are using credit cards, that you're working the system.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Okay. And then, so utilization.
Oh yeah, utilization. The length, which obviously if you're younger, I mean, there's nothing you can really do about that. So you just open up what you can open up.
Yeah.
And just making sure, so like I always tell people, if you can have like a good portfolio of credit. So
Okay.
if you have 1 or 2 credit cards, if you aren't wanting to open up a car loan, fine. Maybe call up AT&T that holds your phone and like, hey, I need you to report to the bureaus. It's called a self-reporting utility. So it gives you a line of credit. Now, if you've been paying on time, this is great. If you haven't or you're late, don't do this.
Right.
But yeah, so trying to have like a mix if you can. I have people that have student loans. They have a couple credit cards, a car loan, and everything's on time. It's great. Easy peasy. But if you don't want to go out of your way to open up all of this new, I don't want to buy a car or get student loans, go to like your water bill or your your phone provider and ask them to do a self-reporting utility so you have like a little portfolio of credit.
Interesting. Is there any other ones from your credit score that I'm missing?
So we have late payment or payment history, utilization. We have the history, and then just the kind of like the makeup of it. So that's generally like the...
Do you think there are any other like misconceptions or things that people just don't understand about buying a home? And then I want to ask more about like your job as a lender.
I would say the misconceptions are you just need a down payment. And this goes a lot with like my first time home buyers. They don't know going into the transaction that there's more than a down
Closing
payment.
costs. Yeah.
Right.
What exactly like goes into closing costs?
So in general, it's going to be your lender. So like we charge a flat application fee.
Right.
And that covers like my clients never pay for me. My company does if and when we close. So if we don't close, I don't ever get paid.
Right.
But the application fee gets paid, and that covers like our salaried people. So our underwriters and processors, everyone else that works on the file. And so we charge an application fee, and then outside of that, you have your credit report, you have your appraisal. If it's new construction, you may need 2, because if the home's not done or if there's repairs. You have, depending on the state you live in, either title or attorney fees.
Okay.
So they're hand in hand, essentially the same thing. So all the title work, the searches, things like that, and then your state will have transfer taxes to go from like, if you're the seller, I'm the buyer, transferring it over to new ownership, the fees to record it with the county and the courthouse. And then outside of that, you have points, which we talked about possibly, and then to set up your escrow account, which is to cover your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance.
Okay.
That's pretty much the bulk of it. Sometimes if you're in a HOA, you have to pay some sort of dues or transfer fee to get into the HOA. If you need like flood insurance, maybe you have to pay some of that. So there are some like little things on the sides that you may have to pay as well, but for the most part, that's like
interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think there are any other last misconceptions or things that people don't understand about buying a home before I switch to asking about lender officers?
I would say it's the 20%. A lot of people still think you need like a 700 credit score.
Oh.
Yeah. Like we go down to a 500.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. But it's like you need a higher down payment.
Right.
Like the general rule of thumb is like most people will work with you if you have a 580 or higher.
Okay. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And more accessible.
Yeah.
I like it. So then, like, as a mortgage lender, Like, how accessible is that career? Like, what qualifications do you need? What kind of degrees do you need to become a mortgage lender?
It should be a lot harder to be a mortgage lender.
Should it?
It should
no.
be. Because it's a hard job. It's not easy.
Okay.
So you have to take a 20-hour course. And I say that because it's not 20 hours.
Oh, no.
Like, it is much longer than that.
Oh, okay.
Which is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not, going to mortgage school is like, they teach you how to stay out of jail, essentially.
Okay.
Like, they teach you all of the rules and like laws that you have to abide by. And they like touch a little bit on like, this is what this program is. And so, but they don't truly like teach you how to be a loan officer and how to like structure files. And that's like, you got to find somebody to help you with that.
Oh, no.
So like when you take the 20-hour course, again, it's not really 20 hours. It's much longer. You go through like the modules, you take the test, and then you have to pass the final exam to exit and get like your certificate. But then from there, you have to find a company to sponsor you, because you can't just be like, my name's Jordan and I'm just like willy-nilly loan officer over here. Like, a company has to sponsor you. So you find somebody to sponsor you, and then you are able to go take the national exam.
Okay.
And the national exam is exceptionally hard.
Okay.
Like, it is so hard. They like do all, I hate double negatives. Those are the ones that kill me. You have, I think it's been so many years now. I feel like you have I don't even know. It's like a 72 or 75. It's something in the 70% range you have to pass.
Wow.
And if you don't, you have to wait 30 days before you could take it again.
Okay.
But eventually, if you pass it, then now you have to find a company that's going to be willing to teach you and like mentor you, because you literally don't
learn anything that you do.
It's just like real estate. Like, I talk to my real estate agents and I'm like, is it the same for you as it was for us? And they're like, yeah. I'm like,
that's crazy.
How does this make sense?
And like, do you need any kind of like specific degree or anything?
No.
No, not. Oh,
No.
so it's like really accessible.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was probably like, I mean, mind you, this was like almost 5 years ago, but it probably cost me like maybe like $300 or $400 for the school, and then it was like $100 or $200 for the exam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what? So you go, you find a company to sponsor you, you take your exam. Mm-hmm. You now are learning on the job. What does a day in the life of a mortgage officer look like? Like, what do you do?
Like, back then or now? Because it's very different.
Both. Tell me both.
So when I first started, I literally was like I was in the office, because this was like right before COVID hit.
Okay.
So I was in the office and I'm listening to all the people talk, because I want to understand, like, how do I make files work? How does this happen? And so I was constantly at the office listening to different positions in the mortgage world talk and structure files. So it was that, and then also trying to figure out how to get clients.
Right.
Because I had never been in the mortgage world. So I was like going to open houses and like going to networking events and taking like after school, like doing extra school on the side to try to learn how to be a mortgage loan officer. So it was like trying to juggle, like, I tell people, if you want to be like uber successful at this job, especially now because the rates are so high, it's a very different market that we're in. You need to like marry the job the first year.
Okay.
Which I was COVID and the rates dropped down, and I still married the job.
Right.
But like, I would highly recommend, if this is a job you want to succeed at like the highest level, you need to marry it and get a really good mentor. And now on what my daily life looks like, it's like, it could be anything. Like, I mean, it could be on a podcast, and then it's like taking a phone call to like schedule an event. I'm making sure clients are okay. I try to take on more of my like referral partners as opposed to like my influencer leads, because I don't have enough time right now. I'm just in the process of trying to hire somebody so I can juggle all of them. So trying to like take care of my referral partner leads that come through and make content, because that's where I get a lot of my leads.
Yeah.
So it's this weird juggle of like, some days I feel more of like a content creator,
Yes.
and some days I'm like, I'm not a content creator, I'm like a loan officer. So it's this weird juggle right now of,
Interesting. So, like, what kind of services do you, like, because you always say that you check on your clients, make sure they're okay.
Right.
What exactly do you do for your clients?
so the client will get, let's say one of my agents refers somebody to me. We'll
Okay.
have that initial phone call and I get an understanding of what they want. How far away are they? Is this a now situation? Is this later? What's their budget? And we kind of go through just a basic list of questions. And if it ends up being somebody that like needs credit help, I will give them I'll say, this is what you need to do. And then I can't do that for you though. You need to take this on. And if you do, come back to me in X amount of time. Let's have another conversation and reassess.
Okay.
If it's somebody who's down the road, then I'll check in on them every so often. Like, are you still good? Do you have any more questions? Are we still on track to start the process down the road? If it's a now client, then it's structuring the file, getting them set up with an agent or talking to the agent, getting our like team on the same page. And then I kind of hang out and run numbers until they like truly find a home. If they're like on a tight budget, I have to run numbers for them. And once they go under contract, they essentially come back to me. I structure it and then I pass it on to the next person in line at my company, because I will always be on the loan. I'll always be accessible to it, but I can't be the loan officer, the assistant, the processor, the underwriter, we have different hats we carry in our company. So throughout the process, I'll constantly check in. Or if one of my teammates is like, I've reached out and I can't get anything, they know that I have a closer relationship, so they'll kind of ask me to step in and see if I can help out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love that. And you love what you do.
I do love what I do. It's there are days that I love it more than others.
Yeah.
Just
feel
like I
that.
think
feel
any
that.
job.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do really love my job because it's one of those things that I get to help people, and whether it's their first home or it's their fifth home, like, it never gets old, and it's really nice to be able to help somebody accomplish a dream. And it's very rewarding, even the hardest like transactions.
What kind of misconceptions do you think there are about, like, that the general public has about loan officers, about like what you do or what you do for them or anything like that?
I think that we get the misconception of we just like put the numbers together and like that's it. Mm-hmm. And that's really not the case, because there's so many like we have to be in contact with the real estate agents, make sure we have all of the documents from them, get the insurance quotes, make sure who are you actually using. We have to send them the documents, they have to bind it. We have to get with the title company. Is there an HOA that we have to speak to? So literally we are the main source of talking to everybody on the transaction to make sure that it closes. And then what gets really frustrating is, even though we're like, hey, this isn't like a right away thing. Like, if we get documents, we'll submit it. You're not the only file. There are hundreds of thousands of files that get closed. And so I know yours is important and I'm going to advocate for you, but there's other ones that are also important. So we have to try to help everybody.
Yeah.
So this is why it's important to get your documents in as soon as possible. And we have hopefully a good team that helps outside of that. But a lot of times I think people are just like, oh, well, they just do numbers and like it's easy. And it's really not, because we are the main focal point of everybody that has to get something done on the transaction.
Wow.
Like, we're the end all be all.
Yeah.
And for instance, it could be something like, oh, well, Jordan, I gave her the documents, it went to underwriting, why is it not back? And I'm like, because there's a lot of processes that come into play that we have to make sure we can fulfill. So it's just one of those things where I think from the outside, if you've never done it, just like creating content, like, oh, it's
so easy.
It's easy.
You don't do much.
Yeah. You don't do very much.
It actually reminds me of another story that a lender sent me about how they worked on this with this one client for a month, 30 days. And it was a little rough because they just didn't communicate very well. And it was really hard to get this done. And literally, they go to closing, and the guy asks right before they sign all the papers, so like, what's the limit of how much I can pay for this loan each month? And they look at him and they're like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, like, what's the maximum I can pay each month for this loan? And they're like, there's not a limit. And he just looks at them, he goes, so I can just pay the whole thing off? Like, just like that? And they're like, are you saying you have the cash to just buy this house? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, then why did you come to us? And he goes, I just thought that's what people did. Like, I didn't know that I could just pay for the house. I thought I had to go through you guys. But I guess if I don't need to, I'm just gonna pay for it then. Sorry. And they all just like, well, I guess we're not getting paid today. And he's like, but it's fine, like, y'all don't really do much anyways.
I think I'm gonna figure out how to use that one.
Isn't that crazy?
I haven't had one, knock on wood, like that, but the one I had, it was close. There's two that were like that.
Okay.
Because, so, I don't make an hourly wage.
Right. You just,
Real estate agents.
It's like commission.
It's commission. Real estate agents do not make an hourly wage. So it's one of those things where we put all of this work up front, praying, obviously we want you to get in your home, but like we are hoping that you close because we are putting hours of our time into a transaction. So we have in the mortgage, this does not apply to the real estate, only in mortgages, but we have what's called an EPO, which is an early payoff.
Okay.
Now, when that happens, which means 6 months, you have to make 6 payments, not 6 months from when you close, because you know you don't make your payments right away. It's 6 payments that you make. After you make 6 payments, in general, like traditional mortgages, you can then pay off your loan. It's not a big deal. If you do it beforehand, though, myself, as your lender, has to pay back the commission. My boss has to pay back, like we all have to pay our money back. This doesn't apply to real estate agents, but in the mortgage world, we have to pay the money back. And so when we get hit with an EPO, it like is debilitating. So with an EPO, which is the early payoff, the client that I had, they needed me to save a deal. And they were supposed to pay cash for it, but the loan officer, or something happened with, I can't remember, she like didn't qualify. She took out like a line of credit. So we ended up getting a loan, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, I know you're going to pay cash for this house, but just keep in mind, like, I need you to at least make the first 6 payments. And I explained to them why. They fully understood. They agreed. And literally like a month and a half later, the client calls and it was like, hey, I was trying to let you guys know that like I paid off the loan. Like, do I not get like a receipt or something? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, yeah, that's what happened. They got like a payout. They were waiting for like a life insurance, or there was some sort of payout. And he's like, yeah, we got the payout. So we went ahead and paid the loan off. And I'm like, and I never do this with clients because I just don't like to, but I was like, I never speak like my true thoughts on something. And it literally just came out and I was like, I'm sorry, what do you mean that you paid the loan off? And he's like, yeah, we got the payout, so we paid it off. And I was like, but we had the conversation that you weren't going to pay the loan off. You had to at least make 6 months of payments. And he's like, oh, that's right. And I'm like, now I have to pay all my commission back. And again, it wasn't like I wasn't thinking, it just came out. It was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. What do I have to do? And I was like, you can't. You paid the loan off. Like, I can't do anything about it. And I was devastated. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And you said you had a second story.
The other one was the clients, like, they were buying the new house before they sold their current one because they had enough money to do so. And I was like, okay, is the goal to keep this house and like rent it out? Or are we planning on like selling it down the road and like paying this one off? And he was like, oh yeah, we're going to sell it and we'll pay this one off. And I'm like, do we have a timeline? And eventually we got down to like whenever it sells, which will probably be very quickly because it's a sought after neighborhood. And I said, unfortunately, if I can't do the loan for you, I just can't, because if you're planning on paying it off within 6 months, I actually lose money because I would have had taxes taken out at that point.
Yeah.
I have to pay my commission back. So I hate to say this, I'm just not willing to do the loan for you. I'm so sorry. And I had to tell the agent, and they did not disclose it to the next loan officer, and they ended up closing on the house.
Oh my god.
And I didn't know who it was. It's not public. Like, I couldn't figure it out. But I saw that they went under contract, and I knew they didn't have enough money. So that loan officer, there's no way the loan officer would have known who's going to work for free.
Yeah.
And actually will
Nobody.
pay for it. Like,
Yeah.
because they have to pay taxes on it.
That's crazy.
So there's somebody out there that they...
So people like will actively just like throw
Use
loan
you.
officers under the bus. That's so like, and that's not even just like, oh, that's disrespectful, that hurt my feelings. Like, that's like financial abuse.
Right.
Oh my
Oh, yeah.
gosh. That's crazy. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Holy moly. My mind is blown right now.
Yeah. So, like, there's technically, on, like, traditional loans, there's not, like, a prepayment penalty. But, like, I will always disclose, like, please, if you plan on paying this off within the first 6 months, or first 6 payments, please just tell me, because I can't do this loan.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense for me to.
No, that makes sense. Like, it's so funny because I know there's going to be people in the comments that are like, well, they have to do what's best for them. Yeah, but so do loan officers. Like, it's still a job.
Right.
Like no one's here working for free for you. Like
that was money I paid for bills, and now I have to, like,
Pay
take
it
it out of,
back.
like, my next commission check to, like, make up for it.
that's crazy. I did not know it worked that way.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other, like, misconceptions or things that people just don't understand when it comes to being a loan officer?
Not that that's, like, the biggest one is
Okay.
the early payoff.
Or are there any, like, other clients that come to your mind that really just make your life that much more difficult? Like, things that people don't realize they're doing that are making loan officers' lives so much more difficult?
Like, just don't. I always tell people, if it has to do with your bank account or your social security number or your job,
Don't do
like,
it.
you talk to your loan officer before you make a decision. Like, do not go quit your job. Don't change from a W-2 job and you say, I just want to quit and now go be self-employed. Like, that doesn't work. We can't do that.
Interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with
Yeah.
me today. I learned so much.
Good,
Like this.
I'm glad.
Oh, actually, I'll add one more thing in
Yeah.
before we go. So something that we always did with both of our houses when it came to, like, because a lot of people don't know that, and I don't know if this number is correct everywhere. We also could just be so misinformed. Like, it's so possible that if you do a down payment of less than 20%, you have loan insurance. So what we always did, because even though if you get loan insurance for less than 20%, once you get to, oh, I have paid 20% of this house off, the house insurance falls off. But what a lot of lending companies will do is they will give a lower interest rate if you also have the loan insurance. Yeah, that's how that works.
So there's a few things that I'm like, ding,
Is this
you
bad?
gotta,
This is
like,
red flaggy?
yeah, I'm like, I go, hold on. There's so much that goes into this. Okay, so the mortgage insurance is on mortgage, the loans that you take out, if you put less than 20%.
Okay, yes.
This is true.
Yes.
But
Okay.
what most people don't realize is the only, VA is exempt, VA never has mortgage insurance.
Right.
The only program that falls off, applies to, is conventional. If you get a
Okay.
FHA loan or USDA loan, it does not, you will have it for the life of the loan.
Okay, got it.
Most cases. It's very few
Okay,
that you get it less.
yes.
even if you hit the 80%.
Right.
So to get out of that mortgage insurance, you have to refinance into a conventional loan.
Yes.
But for conventional
Yes.
loans, yes, you
Yes.
can. A couple things with mortgage insurance. If you put less than 20% down, you can pay for it on a monthly basis. Most people do this. You can also pay for it outright at closing, which most people don't know that you can do that. It can be expensive. It cannot. I mean, it just depends on your credit score primarily, how much you're putting down. But you could always pay for it outright if it makes sense to. But once you hit the 20% threshold, it doesn't actually automatically fall off. You have to request for it to fall off.
Okay, yes.
It will fall
yes,
off
yes.
automatically at 78%.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Yes.
So what we always did was we would put 18% down, and then like right after the first payment would just pay up to the 20 and then request for it to go down.
Yeah.
And that was our little hack.
Yeah.
A little
So they have, it's like with the points that we were talking about. There is, depending on, first time home buyer, not down payment, like the down payment amount, there's like a chart and it's public like record knowledge that you can search, but there's a chart that shows you depending on how much you put down and also your credit score, they like link up, will determine how much more or less in points you have to pay potentially.
Okay. Interesting.
So it could, it does affect it.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thanks
I had
for
so
having
much.
me.
I
This was
learned
great.
so much.
Good.
And I hope other people learned so much. Do you have any last minute words of wisdom for any home buyers out there before we skedaddle?
The only thing is just reiterating how important it is it's never too early to talk to a loan officer.
Yeah.
It really isn't. And if somebody's not willing to talk to you, then
They're
call
red
me.
flag. Yeah.
Or
Call
somebody.
Jordan.
Call somebody that's willing to talk to you.
I love that.
There's somebody out there that's willing to give you a
Information.
few minutes of their time and try to help you better understand what to do.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something today, and
Yeah.
hope you have a great rest of your day, and see you all next week. Bye, my lovelies.
Bye.